Welcome to STARSPEAK with Astrologer Maureen Richmond. Here's where you'll find the latest news on what's up with the heavens. Looking for the inner message from outer space? This is your place. So join me in welcoming your host, Astrologer Maureen Richmond.
Welcome, star friends. I'm Maureen Richmond, and you're listening to StarSpeak on the UNX Network, your channel for everything paranormal, supernatural, and ufological. StarSpeak comes to you every Monday night, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, and 5 Pacific. If you're looking for the inner message from outer space, you've come to the right place. So sit back and relax and get ready for a tour through the zodiac and into the stars beyond. Yes, today is Monday, July 3, the year 2023. And do I have a show for you? There's a lot to talk about, and we'll do it in 4 segments. First of all, I'm going to share with you my understanding of the nature of astrology, what it measures, why it's relevant, where it's come from. And then in segment 2, I'll share my understanding of the energies that we're all dealing with, especially those that have impacted us just recently in the last few years and more recently in the past few months. From there, we'll look at the future and coming influences in the weeks ahead. Segment 3 will concern UFO sightings and the astrological influences that were in effect at the time that those sightings occurred. We'll be looking at 5 important historical UFO encounters and the primary astrological drivers of those events, if you will. Next, in segment 3, we'll take a look at the astrology of an important ufologist, Dr. Stephen Greer, and how that connects up with the general field of ufology. Finally, in segment 4, we'll take a deep view into the future, looking at all those important developments that are so important to star friends, such as the change of consciousness and evolution of consciousness on the planet Earth, the possibility for contact with cosmic extraterrestrials, potentials for disclosure, and breakthrough into higher dimensions. So that's how it will we'll structure our discussion tonight. So let's jump right into it. What is astrology? Well, as I know it, after a lifetime of studying it, I would say it's a system for measuring the subjective energies or the psychological or spiritual energies that we all experience here incarnated on planet Earth. This system is built on the principles of sacred geometry. You're familiar with sacred geometry. You know it's built into the shape and form of the mandala, or the meditation diagram, which, when viewed, conveys a message of wholeness and completion and the relationships of all the parts. The mandala itself is usually either a circular form or a circle, and it's a combination of a circle and a square. And you find it with the circle on the outside or the circle on the inside. But the circle is there, and it's present as an emblem and as a symbol of wholeness, completion, the relationship of all things within the one. The division of the circle by the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 really form the basis of astrology and what we call in astrology the aspects, the way that the moving planetary bodies in the solar system are perceived from Earth. The division of the circle by 1 signifies unity and connects to the astrological aspect called the conjunction. The division of the circle by 2, down the middle, gives you the 2 halves, and it's emblematic of relationship, difference, polarity, all the polarities of life, night and day, male and female, up and down, good and bad, dark and light, the connection between, and the tension between. That's the opposition or the division of the circle by 2. The division of the circle by 3 creates a triangle within the circle, 3 into the 360 degrees of the circle, creating the triangle form. Division by 4 creates the square or 90-degree angle of separation within the zodiac, and so on, including the division by 6. So within astrology are the very principles that live within sacred geometry. And you could say that when we're here in the solar system, seeing and viewing it from the planet Earth, we're inside a system of sacred geometry, which is working its way out, which is manifesting its message to us. The cosmic mind is communicating to us in and through number and sacred geometry all the time by the arrangements of the planets in the solar system as we experience them seen from this planet. Also, the astrological system is a fusion of sacred geometry and the archetypes of ancient mythology. These are the 2 systems that have blended together to create this method for understanding the archetypes and the energies and the conditions that we're all experiencing throughout time during our incarnations here. So it really measures a subjective situation, not a material external situation. Of course, it does affect the material world because consciousness becomes thought and then action. So eventually, yes, it does work its way into the physical world, but astrology itself is a system for measuring the subjective dimension. So there's no conflict or argument with astronomy. For astronomy is focused on measuring the physical properties of the manifested universe. So there's no need for any kind of tension between those 2 fields of knowledge. Astrology does use a different measuring system based on a zodiac constructed on the equinoxes and the solstices instead of the visible constellations. So we do have a different mapping system, but that's what it is. Astrology posits no gravitational influence to account for the action, as is often alleged by people who are looking at the field from the outside, but that's not the case. It's a very ancient system of knowledge, possibly as old as 32,000 years, because it was around 30,000 BCE that early humanity made its first attempts to keep track of the lunar cycle, which indeed was the beginning of what is now the astrological science. So that's where astrology comes from and what it can do for us. It's really a meditative system, a way of contemplating what the universe is communicating to us individually and collectively. So that's it for segment 1 for tonight. So let's have a look at the energies that we've been experiencing collectively and individually for the last few years. The year 2020 was a standout astrologically because it contained a relatively rare configuration, triple conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, all in the sign of Capricorn. Every sign in the zodiac fulfills a function within the circle of wholeness. And every sign in the zodiac has its own purpose. But sometimes the energies of a sign can be too concentrated or become too concentrated when there's a big emphasis by astrological aspect in that sign. So that was the case in 2020, and we had a real wallop from the sign of Capricorn during the year 2020. I think it led in many cases to an unnecessary level of fear, worry, and distrust, and even suspicion of others. That's part of the Capricorn issue set. Capricorn is about security and being certain that everything is safe and good and orderly. And that's a beautiful thing about Capricorn. But when it goes a little bit too far, it can become tense and fearful of all kinds of natural situations. The interesting thing is that this is past us now. This is not going to repeat. It was a relatively rare arrangement, including the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which happens once every 27 to 30 years. So it's not going to repeat anytime soon, and it's now out of the picture. So that particular reaction that we had and then experience that we had is not set to continue. Now, in the year 2021 and the year 2022, we continued to have and deal with and experience fairly tense configuration under the 90-degree separation of Saturn and Uranus. That's a square, Saturn-Uranus square for those 2 calendar years. All astrological influences can ultimately manifest as creative potential and positive consciousness change. But with a square, there's a certain amount of tension, difficulty, and in this case, uncertainty. Now, that mounted to a lot of people making changes in career, in social circles, in place of residence, in life focus, and that was necessary at that time for growth and change. But this too is behind us, and we are now in a different set of energy circumstances, of energy conditions. This calendar year, 2023, we experienced something very new that we hadn't had in quite some time, and that's Pluto's passage temporarily into the sign of Aquarius. Since 2008, it had been in Capricorn, the sign of government, business, corporate culture, emphasis on career, responsibilities, commitments, and obligations, the proper concerns of Capricorn. And so when Pluto moved into a different sign, that was a different situation for us. Briefly, Pluto was in Aquarius from late March through early June and created a little pocket of time where we can have a preview of what it's going to be like when Pluto goes into Aquarius for good. Pluto is one of the most powerful influences in the background of human experience and evolution. And it takes about 16, 17, 18 years to get through a particular sign of the zodiac. The whole time, it powers a particular theme. So that theme is beginning to change. Now, Pluto has gone into retrograde motion, and that's a normal thing for the outer planets, for any of the planets in the solar system. It's back in Capricorn now and will be there through the end of this calendar year. However, in 2024, that will change. But for the rest of this year, we have Pluto back in the sign of Capricorn. So we're kind of back into some of the modes, interests, priorities, and goals that we had between 2008 and the earlier part of this year. We returned to that. In May of this year, there was a very strong astrological configuration called a transiting T-square. It too was relatively rare, involving Jupiter, which was square to Pluto, and Mars, opposing Pluto. It affected the entire month of May. The energies and the subjective realm from it affected us all psychologically for the entire month of May. And if you'd like to know how it manifests, you can look at what happened in United States government in the Congress at that time. It was involved in a massive stalemate over the budget. The key word there is stalemate, lack of progress. When an irresistible force meets an unmovable object sort of situation, fixed signs like that had that type of effect. So what was it inside of us? Well, it was an unwillingness to explore options, change, possibilities for alternative approaches, and instead a strong desire to dig in to the familiar and what seemed like the secure. That created a lot of situations in which people running into walls and not getting any progress in, say, job hunts, creative projects, relationships, across the board. That was the case for May 2023. And it gave us all a time to sit back and think, because we were forced to, as events were not moving on the outer. That condition has been released, as well as as Mars has continued to move forward in the zodiac, and so has Jupiter. So that configuration is no longer exact, and therefore the subjective condition has begun to dissipate. And we saw some really big changes in late June when the planet Mars moved on into the higher degrees of Leo and made a square to Uranus, especially June 25 through June 26. Does anybody remember that period? June 25 through June 26, just a few days ago, when all manner of disruptions occurred. That really shook up the situation, and it was quite different from the stalemate of May. An example of what I'm talking about was the temporary military rebellion that occurred in the Russian army in and around Ukraine and the southern border area of Russia. So it was very short-lived, but it was also very dramatic, and it sort of changed the playing field and made the discussion about the management of that war very different. Now, I'm not for wars, and I'm not suggesting that this is any kind of positive development, but it's an example of the type of energies that we were dealing with. Rebellion, independence of thought, willingness to go up against great powers, and odds against winning even. That's exactly what happened there. So that's an example of the type of stimulation to consciousness that was going on during that period of time. I would say it was a time of psychic and emotional turbulence. People were not at peace. There was a lot of inner tension. Again, this was around the 25th through the 26th of June, but it really affected even more than that, because I know from listening to what people say that it started about June 21 and continued all the way through July 1, with the peak of that intensity around June 25 and 26. So if you experienced anxiety, restlessness, intense uncertainty, you're not alone. A lot of people experience that at the same time. So what we have happening right now in the near future for the week ahead is also important. Today, July 3, we're experiencing the full moon. The sun-moon opposition, which is the definition of full moon, occurred earlier today before this broadcast, 6:39 a.m. Central Daylight Time. The full moon is always a peak experience that brings concepts, ideas, and knowledge that we need to have to light, causes us to face realities within ourselves, truth of our own nature, situations, and where we want to go in life. So this has been a peak moment just last night over into the morning of understanding in that regard. But it's also hard on the emotions. Full moon tends to intensify whatever situations or circumstances or inner questionings that we have, really to a point of crescendo, right at the full moon. So we've been dealing with that in the last couple of days, certainly this very day. Now that intensity will begin to drop off and dissipate as the full moon moves into the waning moon phase in the next few days over the course of this coming week. And with that comes an easier passage emotionally, mentally, physically, and in schedules and relationships and all sorts of things, less tension. In fact, there's a very workable period coming. I call it workable because I think it's going to be smooth and good for getting things done. That's Wednesday, July 5 through Sunday, July 9, with one exception, and that's a period from shortly before midnight on Thursday, July 6, all the way to 9 a.m. on Thursday, July 6, Central Time. Sleep time should be peaceful, but it may not be because the moon during that period squares Uranus, opposes Venus, and opposes Mars, creating a little bit of an echo of the energies and issues from June 25 through 26. Once again, not quite through. Has to have a little bit more say, a little bit more claim on our attention right there. And then we do move into a period that's more peaceful and filled with understanding. Thursday, July 6th from noon Central all the way through Saturday, July 8th. And what you can expect to that period is a more calm, centered outlook. Even the appearance of some solutions for financial concerns, as Mercury in homebody Cancer makes the harmonious sextile to Jupiter in resourceful Taurus. Yeah, you can expect that. So if you're job hunting or you're looking for a loan or any number of things that might have to do with financial security, opportunities are likely to come in this period, July 6 through 8. Success in creative endeavors is also very likely. So that does it for segment 2. Welcome back for segment 3. I'm Maureen Richmond. This is STARSPEAK on UNX Network, your channel for everything paranormal, supernatural, and ufological. Ufological, having to do with UFOs, with their sightings, the study of the sightings, and the understanding of the phenomena. Yeah, that's our topic now, and how astrology relates. Of course, if you're not an astrologer, you probably never troubled yourself about this question. But I've been an astrologer for some 40 years, and I always want to know what the astrological influences are for any important event, whether it's an event in my personal life or some client's life or in the life of an important world figure, or if it's just an important world event, such as a major move in the financial markets, or change of leadership in a country, weather, or many other things, or any of the other things that human beings experience incarnated here on planet Earth. I'm curious about it all. So naturally, I have to know what kind of astrological influences are in effect at the time that extraordinary occurrences like mass sightings or group sightings or even individual UFO encounters occur. One way to do that is to look at what astrological influences were working on the entire collective of the planet at that time. Another way would be to look at the astrological situation of the individual or individuals involved. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing with you observations about the collective influences that were occurring at 5 interesting historical UFO sightings. In the background, of course, is a question in my mind is like, what opens the door for these things to happen, for events like that to happen? What makes it possible? Astrologers are kind of biased in this regard, and I'll admit it. We do tend to think that astrological influences right up there with cause. Yeah, causes. That's a big philosophical question or argument. It's even a theological question or argument for some people. But for astrologers, it's just part of the turf. Yes, amongst ourselves, we say, what transit caused that? What transit brought this about? Meaning, what changing configuration affecting the whole planet or the individual chart? And so that's the background of my thinking. I had to know what astrological influences were happening. And the way that I eased into this was a wonderful book by the Costas, C-O-S-T-A-S, a team of 2 ladies who have done statistical research into sightings. And they produced some graphs showing the numbers of sightings that were reported over, I think it was a 60-year period. And right away, I recognized that there were 2 pronounced periods of much increased reporting of UFO sightings. During 2 periods that I already knew were very special astrologically, and that was the mid-1960s. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, and the period 2012 through 2015. We'll get to that in another episode of StarSpeak. But for right now, we're going back to the mid-1960s. In fact, we're going to go over to Australia, Melbourne, Australia, to the Westall High School sighting, which occurred on April 16, 1966. And that was a really extraordinary situation where about 100 high school students and their instructors were treated to an extraordinary manifestation at their schoolyard when several different numerous disc-shaped UFOs descended over the property line of their school and hovered near some utility wires for a good long period of time. One of the craft even came to the ground, and some of the students felt that they saw beings associated with these crafts. This again was on April the 6th, 1966. Right at that time, the planets Uranus and Pluto were in a very rare astrological configuration, a conjunction. Uranus and Pluto form a conjunction once every approximately 130 years. It doesn't happen all the time. A conjunction in this case is defined as a line of sight arrangement from the vantage point of planet Earth. And that can be positioned within the zodiac or referenced within the zodiac. So it has a specific degree and sign at which or through which it was perceived. And that was the 16th degree of Virgo, a sign connected with what? Education, training, the mind, the acquisition of skills. Uranus is a planet astrologically that deals with shifts of paradigm, great changes of consciousness. And Pluto also is concerned with transformation. So you can see 2 planets involved in radical alteration of viewpoint operating in the sign of Virgo. Education is intimately related to this very sighting. Now, in the same year, about 6 months later, Something else pretty extraordinary happened, this time over in the northern tier of states in the United States at Minot Air Force Base. Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. The date was in September of 1966. And again, Uranus and Pluto, because they both move really quite slowly in the zodiac, were still in conjunction. They separated a little bit, but not very much, with Uranus at 19 Virgo and Pluto at 18 Virgo. This time, it was several UFOs which hovered over a facility housing intercontinental ballistic missiles, which is a very important part of the United States defense system, land and air defense system. UFOs were registered by radar at about 100,000 feet. They descended repeatedly, and every single time one would descend closer to ground level, the radio communications of the base would be disrupted, even though those radio communications were located significantly at a significant depth underground. So that was September of 1966, and Uranus and Pluto were making a conjunction, and you can see the kind of extraordinary events associated. Let's move up to another period of time in which Uranus again was active astrologically. That's the sighting at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in November of 1975. The dates were the 7th and 8th of November 1975. At that time, Saturn had moved on up into the sign of Leo. It was located at the 3rd degree of Leo, and Uranus had moved on up to the sign of Scorpio. It was at the 4th degree of Scorpio, just past an exact square. So again, the two planets are Saturn and Uranus. You can see the similarity here is the planet Uranus, which was involved in the 1966 situation and also the 1975 situation. Here it is again in 2021 in the famous 29 Palms incident, in which some 50 Marines viewed a large black triangle UFO for a good 10 minutes, and many of them were able to capture video and still photographs. That was April 20th, the year 2021. That whole year, 2021, remember I talked about it earlier just a little bit ago about the tension because of the square between Saturn and Uranus? Well, it was still operative in the month of April as well. So Saturn was located at 13 Aquarius and Uranus 10 Taurus. That's close enough to exact to be in effect. So again, the planet Uranus was involved in that extraordinary situation. In that same year, a few months before, February 21, the year 2021, there was yet another extraordinary development when a commercial airline pilot operating over New Mexico saw a cylinder-shaped UFO for a good bit of time. Saturn at 8 Aquarius was square Uranus at 7 Taurus. So you can see that that year of 2021, with its emphasis on Uranus, again correlated to extraordinary events and situations. Interestingly, the ufologist Stephen Greer also has an emphasis in his personal astrology on the planet Uranus. He was born on June 28, 1955, so he just had a birthday the other day. Happy birthday to Dr. Greer. And he is a sun sign Cancerian, with his sun located at 6 degrees Cancer. Most people know that the sign of Cancer concerns a love of home. It's also a love of country and nation, and certainly Dr. Greer has evidenced a concern with the future of our country, the United States, and its Constitution. And then one of the things that he's pushed for and advocated for is greater adherence to the Constitution and respect for it as a tradition. all of which he comes by naturally as a sun sign Cancerian. But that's not all that's going on in the personal astrology of Stephen Greer. On June 28, 1955, the planet Mars was located 22 Cancer. The planet Uranus was located 27 Cancer. And the planet Neptune 25 Libra. So in those three, there are two squares, especially the Uranus-Neptune, which greatly emphasizes the planet Uranus again in his own chart. Now, he's not the only ufologist who has an emphasized Uranus in his personal astrology. As a matter of fact, the same thing or a similar thing is found in the personal astrologies of 4 other key ufologists, including George Adamski, who was an early writer in the field of ufology, who has the sun opposite Uranus in his own personal astrology, and J. Allen Hynek, who had the square between Saturn and Uranus in his personal astrology, because he was born on a day when Saturn was square Uranus. You know, the same configuration that was evident in some of the sightings we talked about. Linda Moulton Howe has Uranus emphasized in her chart. She has Saturn conjunct Uranus. And Richard Dolan has Mars square Uranus, emphasizing Uranus in his chart. So what is this with Uranus and ufology? Well, Uranus was discovered in the late 1700s, and it's inherently connected with all forms of modern advancement and technology, including air flight and electricity and computers, which all developed in the modern era. It's also archetypally within astrology a symbol that inclines, or an influence that inclines people towards independence of thought, towards the ability to create their own hypotheses, see beyond the current narrative, and to think outside the box. So what, if anything, are ufologists but people who have a lot of imagination and also the scientific drive to back up their observations? Uranus is a very powerful influence in both UFO sightings and in the consciousness of the people who have driven this field forward to the place where we are now, which represents a considerable advancement for humanity. So that does it for segment 3. Welcome back, star friends. I'm Maureen Richmond, and this is STARSPEAK for July 3, 2023. We're moving into our closing segment now for the evening, which is a discussion of a deep view into the future. You know, star friends are all interested in seeing conditions on our planet change for the better. Star friends are interested in seeing the petty conflicts that exist between individuals and nations drop away. Star friends like you and me, we're all interested in seeing the people of the world treated with justice and respect. We're looking for a change of consciousness on this planet. And the question often comes up, what is the prospect for that sort of development? Star friends want to know, too, about the possibility for contact with cosmic extraterrestrials, for disclosure, and for the possibility of the breakthrough to higher dimensions. So that's what we'll be looking at here in this fourth segment. Ahead of us lies some very real potential for changes in the kinds of directions that we're interested in seeing. To my mind, most of that is tied to the movement of Pluto into Aquarius. Remember that Pluto is one of the most important background evolutionary influences on the consciousness of humanity. And we are talking about consciousness because astrology measures subjective energies. You know, what's going on in our minds and our hearts, what's important to us, what we're looking for, the themes that we're searching out, trying to understand or live within. It largely comes from the outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, and they're the signs that they're in. And Pluto is one of the most important. For the last, 15 years, Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn. Yeah, so that's brought our attention to the issues, the themes, the goals, and the values of the Capricornian complex. And there's nothing wrong with that. Every single sign in the zodiac fulfills a divine purpose within the zodiac. It's not as if Capricorn is bad. It's not. Capricorn individual people are not bad. I like them very much. Capricorns have a special understanding for organization, for order, for accountability, for administrative tasks, and many other talents. So it's not as though Capricorn is a bad influence. It's not. But Pluto is a very powerful influence. It gets its meaning from the ancient Greek god Hades. Hades ruled the underworld. The Roman equivalent is Pluto. So we call it Pluto because we're a Latinized society, basically. But it's the same figure. Pluto, Hades, the god of the underworld. So what was the underworld about in Greek mythology? Well, it's not the hell world of the Bible. It's in fact a transformational zone that souls went to in between incarnations before rising up again literally through the earth to be born again. Part of that process was a catharsis of self-examination, reviewing the contents of the conscience, of one's conscience. And that went on in the Hades realm, the underground world of Pluto. Pluto is still all about that stuff. It's all about looking below the surface, digging down deeper. So where has Pluto been digging down deeper? In all the things that have to do with Capricorn. Government, business, commerce, regulations, laws, finance, money. Pluto's been digging under the surface in all of those areas. It's been an exhausting process, hasn't it? We've seen so much. We saw the financial meltdown of 2007 and 8 and 9 that affected so many people throughout the United States and around the world because of some ill-advised investment practices that were being carried out and indulged in by a relatively small number of people. One could argue whether that financial meltdown was organic, arising naturally, or manipulated or designed or orchestrated. Either way, it revealed and exposed things that were under the surface and had been going on for all this time. So it's been a cathartic process to have Pluto move through the sign of government and business. We found out things that we probably suspected, but now we know are true, about the use of governmental force, about the capacity of government and corporate entities to exert their will upon individual human beings. So the thing that's going to change now is that is going to be less of a theme as Pluto moves into Aquarius. And it will do so in January of 2024 and stay there through early part of, the late part of August 2024. That'll be back in Capricorn by retrogradation September, October, and November of 2024. And then thereafter in Aquarius to stay. So we have this kind of alternating experience between Capricorn and Aquarius that we're still with now. But it is the trend of the future that Pluto will go into Aquarius. And that is the symbolism that strongly suggests that we will have a shift of consciousness towards the priorities and the goals that star friends are interested in. Again, what would those years be? Well, from December of 2024 through the year 2043, about 18 years. For about 18 years, we'll have Pluto in Aquarius. And instead of the drama of the Capricornian realm, we will have the drama of the Aquarian realm. What is that? The sign of Aquarius is the sign of friendship, companionship, connection, and community, power sharing, equality even, and group consciousness rather than that of intensive, individualistic profit motives. So there's a huge shift there. There's just a huge atmospheric change or set of issues evolving that will be coming very soon that really strongly points in the direction of the types of things that star friends are interested in. What does it mean? Could it mean that we could enter into some type of cosmic brotherhood, sisterhood, fraternity, sorority, society, community with intelligence beyond our planet? It does. It opens the door for that. Is it definite? It's pretty strong. I would say, given humanity's current interests and what's happening in disclosure and contact, it's very likely. So yeah, there's a big potential for all of those things that we're interested in, particularly in a shift of consciousness in the whole family of humanity towards a recognition of all the members of humanity as neighbors, as non-enemies, as individuals that we want to work with and collaborate with and do teamwork with. Aquarius represents the team spirit. Is there anything bad about Aquarius? Sure, any astrological archetype can manifest in a distorted way, but there's a great potential in the sign of Aquarius for this more open, sharing dynamic that I'm talking about right now. So yeah, the answer is yes, and it's related to Pluto and Aquarius. Is there a potential for a shift of consciousness on the planet Earth away from, say, environmental degradation due to corporate business practices? Yes, there is a potential for that. Is there a potential for moving away from authoritarian regimes? Yes, because of Pluto and Aquarius, and we'll see how it works out. In 2024, we're going to have an opportunity to really experience a preview of what can happen. It won't be just a preview. There will be an actual experience. It will be an extraordinary moment in time. I'm talking about April of 2024. Most of you probably already know that there's a total solar eclipse that will occur during that month. It's true. Now, something else you want to know is that during a total solar eclipse in 1991 in Mexico City, there was a dramatic mass sighting of what most people believe were UFOs. Again, that was in 1991. It's a total solar eclipse. On the very day of the total solar eclipse, there was a mass UFO sighting. So total solar eclipses may very well represent an opportunity portal for Earth humanity to make contact with cosmic extraterrestrials or the higher dimensions, depending on how you look at the question of the origin of UFOs. So that's coming in April of 2024, which is not very far away. Now, in that same month, there will be 3 other powerful astrological influences that have been associated with major UFO sightings in the past. Let's start with the big one. Transiting Jupiter and transiting Uranus will be conjunct next April in the early 20 degrees of the sign Taurus. Taurus, the bull. Jupiter and Uranus will be conjunct. That's relatively rare. It only happens once every 14 years or so. It's rare in itself. But let me tell you what, there was just exactly such a conjunction in 1941 when the Cape Girardeau incident took place. That's right, 1941, before 1947, before 1948, the Cape Girardeau incident. And by the way, a wonderful book has been written about this by Margie Kay and her associates. So please do look that up and read more about Southeast Missouri and all the extraordinary sightings that have occurred there, including the 1973 flap, I believe it was, in that area. Southeast Missouri, where Cape Girardeau is definitely a UFO hotspot. And it was one of the first to see some important action. That was in springtime of 1941, when a crashed UFO with deceased alien bodies was discovered by a big crew of law enforcement officers, firefighters, military, and a local minister checked it out. And you could read about the records on that. So that was the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction of spring 1941, under which that important event occurred. Bingo. Guess what? In April 2024, Jupiter will again be conjunct in the early 20s of Taurus. It's almost an exact recurrence. So that's a strong potential that portal can open. In addition, Mercury will be retrograde, as it was in a number of important historical sightings that I'll tell you about in future episodes of StarSpeak. And in April of 2024, the Sun will be conjunct Mercury, also a relatively rare influence that is associated with a number of important historical UFO sightings. So there are 4 conditions in April of 2024 that match up to conditions in prior mass sightings and major UFO developments in history. 4 of them, all in April of 2024, and Pluto will be in Aquarius by that time. Pluto will be in Aquarius, yes, for about 8 months in 2024, starting right off at the beginning of the year and going for about 8 months. So that again is going to be our preview window of opportunity about what Pluto and Aquarius could be in the 18 years of its solid effect from late December 2024 through 2043. So there's very good promise for contact with cosmic extraterrestrials, for disclosure, and for breakthroughs into higher dimensions right ahead in April 2024. There's a report due to the federal government in June of 2024. So you see, April of 2024 is pretty close in terms of the disclosure movement. Definitely there is potential for dramatic development and happenings in April 2024 along all of these lines. And in a little bit closer in time to where we are right now, there's a notable passage coming in November of 2023, this current year, when Mars at 21 degrees of Scorpio will form an exact opposition with Uranus, the important planet in ufology, in many UFO sightings, and in periods of time that have seen great strides made in human understanding. Again, that's mid-November this year when Mars opposes Uranus as seen from the Earth's position. By the way, Yes, astrology is a system for contemplating subjective energies based on a mapping system. And that mapping system starts from Earth as our frame of reference or the ground on which we stand. But that does not mean that astrologers think that the Earth is the center of the solar system. Nah, we know what is. It's our local star, and that's to whom our allegiance is. You know, just like human beings, we all want to communicate with each other. We want to exchange perspectives. We want to understand each other. We really can't do without it. It's a big piece of human experience. Animals do the same. We even understand that plants communicate with each other. What do you bet stars do as well? So when we're listening in on the life of our solar system through astrology, we're also listening in on the greater conversation amongst the star beings of our galaxy, because they're talking to each other. They're in telepathic connection. As we get in touch with the star vibrations from our own local star, we're tapping into that as well. So let's see. I think that, no, we have a little bit more, excuse me, and I have 3 more minutes, so I'm going to take it. Hey, Race, are we out? No, not yet. Okay, what's ahead? Ways to manage the star energies and challenges of the time. This will be quick. You've all heard of 20th century mythologist Joseph Campbell and his famous dictum, follow your bliss, right? And what he specifically said was follow your bliss, which you can understand as your passion or your love or your desire, whatever you're excited about in life. Follow your passion, and doors that you didn't even know existed will open. Follow your bliss, and doors you didn't even know existed will open. Bashar, channeled by ufologist Daryl Anka, gives us a little bit more specific idea of what that's all about. In the book, Making Contact, Daryl Anka reports that Bashar has said, here's how to transform your life in the times of stress. At every moment you can, act on your most passionate interest, curiosity, or delight, whatever that is, whatever you're interested in, whatever you're curious about or want to know about. At every moment that you can, be active about that. Act on it. 2, to the full extent that you can. 3, without any concern for the results or what it will get you. And 4, remain positive no matter what happens. So those are some strategies for dealing with astrological conditions, even if they turn challenging at any given time. Remember, follow your bliss, and doors that you didn't even know were there will open. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to StarSpeak. Thank you for our UNX listeners, for our YouTube listeners, and for our Rumble listeners. This is Maureen Richmond at StarSpeak, signing out for UNX Network.